Yeah, you spelled my name wrong. I got it.
Oh, he's in Mike's office.
I can also hear
Just-
every one of your side conversations like perfectly clearly, but all at the same time.
Wait, we're talking.
Who are you following along with?
This is a good experiment.
It keeps hopping along. Like there was something about as long as you're not walking, you're fine. And then something in Amy's ceiling. And then somebody's kid is mocking Don. I don't know.
Pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
You didn't miss much.
Where are you, Kaylee?
I never did find the Wi. I'm in my grandma's kitchen. I never did find the Wi-Fi password, so we're just using my phone.
It's probably
Short and sweet. Done 3 minutes.
I'm ready to go whenever you are. We're live here. So
Yeah.
All right, let's call to order. Stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
To do roll call, right?
Yeah.
Roll call, Mary Ann,
Here.
Kaylee,
Here. Here. Can you hear me?
I don't know.
Oh,
Here.
I can see him. Kaylee, can you hear us? Oh,
I
I don't
can.
hear the microphone. Oh, there we go. Okay.
How about
I'm
a
here.
thumbs up? Are you here?
I'm here.
She's
here.
Josh,
Here.
Brian,
Here.
Scott,
here,
Peter,
here.
and I am here. Motion to accept roll.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That brings us to the study session, the budget.
All right. We are ready to go.
Oh, I was waiting for the grand introduction.
Well.
We are going to be here for a while, aren't we? All right. Well, welcome. I'm just going to stay here. If you guys have questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt. But this is the first of at least 3 budget study sessions. And this is the one that we kind of take a 35,000-foot view of the budget, what we call a program maintenance budget. So we'll talk about kind of how we look in terms of revenues, how we look in terms of expenses at this point, and we'll go from there. Dr. Genestri, if you could hit the next slide, please. So for us, as we get going, just a couple of important dates as we work through the process here. Our final tax cap calculation is due to New York State on March 1st. School board candidate nominating petitions are due on April 22nd. Mr. Feldman's term expires in June, so we have 1 seat that will be open on the board election in May. The last day for the board to adopt the proposed budget would be April 26th. Our property tax report cards are due on April 29th. Our required public hearing on the proposed budget anywhere from May 7th to May 14th. And the annual school board election is on May 21st. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of summary in what we've done to date and what we kind of plan to talk about in the next handful of sessions. So to this point, through January here, we've gotten a preliminary information on state aid, both from our November runs and then from the executive budget proposal in January. We do have a property tax cap calculation. We have met with several of our administrative team and department heads. We have a couple that were left. The snow days kind of impacted some of those. We had our initial BOCES participation meeting. They came in and they met with Dr. Genestri, Dr. Wilson, Beth Kozakowski, and Bob Ellenfield, our tech team, as well as Nicole Kuss and I. We do spend pretty close to about $4 million with BOCES, so that's that's a meeting that is important to kind of work through and kind of get to a point where we need to get the resources that we want and through BOCES. We have met with our financial advisor, Maggie Aguilera, at Municipal Solutions to kind of review the overall aid projections, get a new debt service schedule based upon, if you remember correctly, we just finished our closed out our big $40 million capital improvement project. So we have all the cost reports in there, and we've adjusted our debt service schedule and the building aid that comes as part of that. So today we're going to talk about a program maintenance budget based upon on the executive proposal that I did just mention. We'll take a look at some budget development objectives and priorities in terms of things. We'll talk a little bit about staffing. We'll talk about the use of reserve funds. We'll talk about the tax cap and where we want to land with that. In March 12th, we hope to have a more preliminary budget for you, more detailed budget than what we have at this point in time, including staffing recommendations. Just as a point of note, we know that the teacher contract settled. The board voted on the teacher contract just this past Tuesday night. In the teacher contract, there is a retirement incentive. And generally that retirement date that we need to know that is February 1st, but given the late time as to when the contract was settled, that date is February 28th,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Yep.
So we'll have a pretty good idea as to where we stand in terms of retirements, health obviously, and how that will impact staffing as well as the budget and budgetary impact. Then on April 9th, as part of our study session, we'll update the budget and hopefully by that point in time, the New York State budget will be complete and done. They do have an April 1st deadline. Sometimes it's adhered to, sometimes it's not. So we'll see where that lands. And then final kind of state aid runs. We'll talk a little bit about state aid here momentarily, but if you remember correctly, last year was the first year that New York, by the basic state aid formula, that the district was fully funded. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. And then on May 21st, the annual school board and budget, our board will adopt the budget on April 16th, 2024. And then the budget vote will be on May 21st, 2024, here in this room from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. We lose our connection.
We did. Trying to get it back. Go. And that, from what we're hearing, that April 1st date is a very, very lofty goal for in the New York State budget.
Correct.
So we expect it to go deep into April, based on some of the changes that the governor is proposing. So
Correct. Next slide, please, Mike. So from building a budget, this is kind of a repeat slide from what we've done in the past, but we do need to establish boundaries. We strive to do a budget that is both fiscally sound and maintains our core programs. The board has traditionally looked at creating a budget that falls at or below the tax cap. If you remember correctly, last year we went out tax neutral, which was fantastic. We need to project revenue, and those revenue sources primarily come from state aid and tax receipts, and then project expenses in terms of enrollment, staffing, and we'll look today a little bit at some other expenses that do have major kind of budgetary impact. And then we'll look at the bottom line as to where we stand right now at a 35,000 foot view and kind of talk about some of your priorities and where you think you want to head in terms of finalizing the budget. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to do a program maintenance budget with our best estimates to date. We'll pinpoint some revenue projections. We'll have a tax cap discussion about where we are with the tax cap. And then our use of reserves in that area as well. We'll isolate again some major expenditures from the present school year. We'll discuss staffing and the impact of potential retirements based upon the retirement incentive. And again, that retirement incentive, just for the good of the cause here, that retirement incentive for teachers for this year, the retirement incentive is for not only teachers that are first eligible, but any teacher who's reached the age to be at a retirement step. And then we'll discuss kind of where you want to head and next steps. And please, again, as I mentioned, at any point in time, if you have questions, just throw something at me and I'll answer. So, or do my best. So state aid, this is the first area. We're going to start on the revenue side. And again, as I mentioned before, the 4 areas that do impact the revenue side of the budget: state aid, real property taxes, that's our tax cap and our tax levy, pilots, payments in lieu of taxes, sales tax, and then the use of reserves to close any potential budget gaps or to use them as a revenue source. They don't necessarily have to close budget gaps. As I did mention, New York State promised to fully fund our basic foundation aid by 23-24. They did that last year. Our foundation aid last year was about $21,764,000, which by the formula was fully funded. This year for 24-25, and again, these are numbers that are based on the executive proposal that's been proposed by the governor in January. Our foundation aid for 24-25 fully funded is $23,856,725. The foundation aid that's been proposed on the executive budget by the governor for Sweet Home basic foundation aid is $23,536,375. That is a difference of $320,350. So we are not fully funded as we should, at least at this point in the executive runs.
Don, in her executive proposal, I heard a lot of noise. I was having trouble tracking it all in the news, but she was making a lot of noise that the reason they're not fully funding the runs is because that the districts are sitting on cash. Is there any push or anything proposed to reduce or, I guess, prescribe reserve levels? I think we're good, but I'm just curious if she's trying to do something to force the district's hands.
So I haven't seen anything to that level, Josh. What I have seen is on the flip side, and we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday, that my group, Mike's group, the school board's group are advocating on behalf of fully funding again. What's happening, and this is my interpretation of the formula. The formula takes into account inflation. Her executive runs account for inflation at about 2.4%. The formula says that foundation should actually be about 3.8% in consideration. So there's about a 1.5 difference there. And then she's eliminating the Save Harmless piece of it, so that if your enrollment is steady or declines, likely your state aid would decline. Our enrollment has gone up, so I'm not exactly sure that there's a reason as to why we're at this delta and difference, but that's kind of where we're at right now. So
I think about half of the districts around the state, over 350, about 320, I think they said, actually saw a decrease in state aid due to the Safe Harmless piece being removed.
A year-over-year decrease.
Year-over-year decrease from last year, yes. Yep.
correct.
And is just curious, because I know I've heard she's using a 10-year number for inflation.
That's
10-year
correct.
average. Yep. Is it clear in the formula? Has it always been clear that wouldn't be, or is it kind of?
She changed it. She changed it at the discretion.
She's ignoring the formula,
Okay.
Yeah.
my opinion.
I agree.
If you would hit the next slide, please, Mike. So this takes a closer look at our aid year to year based upon where we are presently versus where we are in the executive runs. So our basic foundation aid, again, for 24-25, $23.5 million. Our excess cost, special education, as well as transportation aid, has seen a significant increase from about $5.15 million to about $5.7 million. That's twofold. Our special education numbers continue to increase across the district, but also that's due in large part to our contracted transportation and the costs that we've incurred with contracted transportation. That's really the reason for that jump there. Scott Kennedy and his team have done a great job. We're bringing on new bus drivers, and you'll see in our budget proposal that we've maintained the budget line. There's been no increase in the contracted transportation line. We feel as though with the new drivers that are coming in, we won't need to increase contracted transportation. Will actually pull back some contracted transportation that from a bottom line standpoint, that'll be a neutral movement. So there won't be any cost increase. The building aid, again, a minimal increase to about $3.4 million. Some of the remainder of the capital improvement project is starting to hit. Our BOCES aid up minimally to $1.65 million. And then the other expense-driven aids, textbook aid, computer hardware aid, computer software aid, and library aid up minimally about $3,000 a piece. One thing that I did want to point out to you that is new to the budget this year, we were notified, I don't remember, Toya, when we were, but we were notified earlier this year that we've been awarded a state UPK competitive grant for UPK full day expansion. If you remember, we get federal money for the UPK program at about $710,000, but because we've gone to full day UPK and added sites, Toya and her team worked to put together a grant, and we were notified earlier this year that we got the grant, and that grant will continue into next year. So that's a nice little boost for us in terms of aid to be able to offset some of the costs for UPK and the full day conversion. So in the end, you see the difference there. Last year, we were about just a little over $32 million in state aid. This year, if things hold true to form, we'll be at about $35.1 million. And remember, there's that $320,000 that's still hanging out there. If I were a betting man, I would bet that we'll see that money when the budget is finalized. I hope, to Mike's point earlier, that by the time we vote on our budgets in April, that we'll know whether or not we have that state aid coming in. I don't know if we will. I don't know.
Don, is there any asylum aid included in any of this?
Well, I would say that the overall increase in our basic foundation aid was due to those, the
So
immigrant
there's not
students.
additional on top of that?
No,
We're asking.
so we've had conversations
Yeah.
about that with state ed this year. If anything, it probably would come in terms of a title increase. They've been talking about Title III. They're not moving all that quickly on it, but we're at a point now where if it does come in, it would be in that realm. But that increase, the basic foundation aid increase for us is due in large part to our increase in overall enrollment, specifically ELL and immigrant students.
And in my meetings, I was told that the Sweet Home percentage bump was high in comparison to other districts. Part of that was asylum students, but to Don's point, overall enrollment, increase in special ed, the number of enrollment in special ed, and the increase in asylum students.
Dr. Nestor, would you hit the next
Yes.
slide, please? So that's state aid. We'll move to the tax cap. As you know, that there is a tax cap law that's in place by New York State that says the tax levy limit allows school districts to increase their property tax levy from one year to the next by 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. So you see in that little red box there that our tax levy cap, sorry, say that 3 times fast, is 2% this year. The rate of inflation that they use to factor in is a little over 4%. So we are at 2% of a tax cap this year. Now remember, the 2% tax cap, there are exclusions to that, which we'll kind of talk about in the next slide. But the 2% tax cap is what we have to work with this year. So this is our tax cap. This is basically from where we are this year. So if you remember, it's based on the tax cap is the amount that you are allowed to increase your levy from year to year. We went out last year flat. We kept the levy from 22-23. The same again in 23-24 at just over 53,321,588. So there's a number of things that you need to kind of factor in there. A couple of things of note. The state Comptroller's Office sets a growth factor that we have to utilize in our calculation. The growth factor decreased this year pretty significantly. We are at a growth factor, an allowable growth factor of 1.0160% as opposed to 1.0221 last year. So it is something that is pretty significant in terms of a decrease for us. There are other things that, you know, as I mentioned before, that we did keep the budget tax neutral. There are some things that, you know, the town of Amherst, as you all know, when we have discussions kind of going forward about what we want to do with the cap, the town of Amherst went above the cap for their property taxes this year. So that's something that we'll probably have to have some discussion. And then, yep, sorry.
Sorry. The tax-based growth factor, where does that come from?
State Comptroller's Office, they set it.
Is that just for our 2 towns or is it a bigger number?
No, it's for individual school districts. So they set a tax-based growth factor for every school district.
And growth is based as growth of student population or growth of population or just a standard growth?
There's a lot of things that are factored into it. Yes, it's a student population, it's your wealth ratio, census data, things along those lines that go into those.
So it's not like the evaluation part, is that?
No.
That's not a part of it.
No.
Okay,
No.
that's
no.
what it struck me as, and it's.
Correct. I'm sorry if I
No, that's okay.
misinterpreted that. So there are a number of things that are exclusions to the tax cap, most notably anything in terms of capital improvement projects, debt service, any capital expenditures. So for us, the majority of our exclusions are related to our debt service, but also to our bus purchases. So one of the things that we have to kind of work through right now, as you remember, you may recall, we've been awarded as part of the NYSERDA truck voucher incentive program. We've been given a grant that will allow us to purchase 3 electric buses. Our plan is, if the budget passes, that we purchase 3 electric buses. And we would get $200,000 towards those electric bus purchases. So our intent is to purchase 3 electric buses, the 3 buses, large buses, and then 3 small buses, 3 30-passenger buses, 1 with the wheelchair access to it. So our bus purchases in the budget now are about $991,000 in terms of bus purchases. Now, we are in the hopper for funding through another NYSERDA grant. We are in the hopper for funding on, through the EPA. So that, if we are awarded funding to help offset some of the costs of the 3 electric buses, that number is taken out of our tax cap. So our expense budget goes down, but also our tax cap would decrease by that similar amount, okay? So I just want you to be aware of that. You know, again, come March 1st, if we don't know, this is our number, because we didn't know at the time, but if we are awarded some additional funding, we'd have to adjust that.
When do you think you'll hear about?
I don't know.
Hopefully March 2nd.
I mean, I don't know, right? I don't know when we would hear. We put in just around Christmas time for the NYSERDA grant. And then the third, so we were waitlisted the first round of EPA funding. We were declined. We went, if you remember, we partnered with Highland Bus Company on the second round to be part of a kind of a nationwide conglomerate. And that's the one that that's the one that Lakeshore was awarded to get all their buses. We were declined in that one. And now we are in round 3. Round 3, the deadline for EPA, round 3 is this coming Friday. Our application is in, so I hope that we'll get some answers
Is
fairly
this the
soon.
buses or the infrastructure?
This is
I know
buses.
There was one for infrastructure.
This is buses, so this is buses, good question. This is buses solely. There is another NYSERDA one for infrastructure that is not out yet, and they've not released it yet. So I'll just kind of sidetrack here a little bit, and I was talking with Mike about this. With the 3 here, we did, they presented to us kind of a phased process to get us fully electrified. The first phase was the temporary charging stations. So in my time, when I sat on a panel for electric buses at the state convention for ASBO, Sarah Madison, who's the facilities planning director at State Ed, was on our panel. She's the one that approves all the building projects and things like that. So the question from the audience, from me, was like, this is what we want to do. Do we need to do a project, and do we need to go through facilities planning? Because we're not really doing any demolition, we're not doing anything, we're just adding electric service. And she said, if you'd like aid, you need to come through. She said, you need to come through. So, okay. So in conversations then with Wendell, we're gonna start to build a project. But what I don't wanna have happen is facilities planning right now, their review time is 18 to 24 months. So what I don't want to have happen is to have 3 shiny new buses sitting in our parking lot and no way to charge them. So I reached out to Sarah and said just that. And she said, I gave her the scope of work, and she assured us that we could have an expedited review. So hopefully, we're going to plan to submit the project to State Ed this coming week with Wendell. And then if things go according to plan, we can upgrade over the summertime and be ready to go. Then with NYSERDA, I reached out to NYSERDA, our rep at NYSERDA, and said, when's the application going to open up? Because I'd like to be able to take part of this. And he goes, I'm not sure. So and he knows our situation because he's been a partner with us all along. So he's going to look out and see if he can find additional funding for us aside from this to get these charging stations at no cost to the district. So we're working. It's kind of the cart before the horse type thing, but we're working because I just don't want to have buses sit and not us being able to use them.
So if this got approved, then buses would show up.
Great question. We are still waiting for our buses from last year. Again, we have our bus manufacturer, Matthews, knows that we have an intent to purchase the 3 buses if our budget does pass. I don't know.
If this passes, then you can purchase them and still wait 18 months or
Yes.
whatever, and
Yes.
that money just stays on hold?
Correct.
And the price.
And the price.
Price is
Yes,
what
we're
I'm
in.
thinking, yes.
So then that's why we do it so early, because we got in at a price that was before the next
Base.
increase, right? So, sorry, in the end, basically with all of our exclusions and things along those lines, our pilots and such, our number, our tax cap number, is 4.65%. So we're above that 2%, obviously, but it means an increase, a potential increase of $2,477,035. So that would be a tax levy increase if we went right to the cap. Next slide, please. So the next piece of revenue for us, that is a big chunk of our budget, is sales tax revenue. That revenue comes to us from Erie County. You can see in the 22-23 column, we netted in totality $5.1 million in sales tax. It's distributed quarterly, September, December, March, and June. At this point in time, we've gotten our first 2 payments in sales tax. So we're trending towards the $5 million mark. So that's the estimate that we've put into the budget for 24-25, $5 million in sales tax revenue. So it's tough to see, but you have it on your desks in front of you. This is a closer look at our revenue projection for this year. Our revenue projection for this year has revenues coming in at $102,690,623. This is an increase of $5.8 million or 6%. And again, this is going right to the cap. You'll also notice that we kept, and we'll have to talk about this a little bit, but we did keep, if you remember last year, we utilized some of our reserve funds more than we normally do. We normally have about $125,000, aside from debt service, we normally have about $125,000 in reserve use to kind of close our budgetary gap. But we did add $1.1 million in reserve usage last year to get us to a point tax neutral. If you remember, I think it was the will of the board, because of the increase both in state aid and the federal funding that we were receiving, we felt as though that it was important for us to go out tax neutral, and we utilized that $1.1 million. That $1.1 million is still in the budget. This year's budget is performing well. The factor here is the new teacher contract. We budgeted for the new teacher contract, obviously. However, with the retirement incentive, that was an incentive that we did not necessarily budget for. So it does have a budgetary impact. So if teachers are retiring this year in June, the retirement incentive is structured such that they'll receive their incentive payout to the maximum allowable limit on June 30th, and the rest of it will be paid out the following calendar year in January. However, all of that money is attributed to the previous year's budget. So any retirement incentive that would be paid out as a result of retirees on June 30th will be attributed to this current year budget. Next year, I have put in to the budget a retirement incentive to the level of about 10 teachers. Okay, at this point in time, and I don't know, Mike, if you want to talk a little bit more about it, but we have definitively 9 teachers that are in for retirement, and potentially a half dozen or so more. So we could potentially get to 15. Okay, which means that, you know, some of that, or that retirement incentive rather, will have to be brought out of the general fund budget. As I mentioned to you, as we went through contract negotiations, this contract negotiation, the timing of this contract negotiation was good because we still had 1 year left of the American Rescue Plan funding that attributed to a significant number of salaries. So I think that, we can get through, I'm hopeful that we can get through the retirement incentive without hitting some of those reserves. But there is a potential, depending upon how many teachers retire and at what level their incentive is, that we may need to dip into some of those reserves and utilize those. So there's some discussion that'll have to be had. Do we want to go to the cap? Do we want to continue to use reserves? But that's where we're at in a basic rollover budget.
Yeah, and to Don's point, that February 28th date is important for us. We do have 9 confirmed right now, and I know Human Resources has at least a dozen more meetings to go. So we'll see after February 28th what our staffing plan is, and then we're preparing it now, but until we have those numbers definitively, it's hard to tell. But obviously, retirements equal savings in starting next year and then every year after. So February 28th will be a big date for us to start planning, or we're starting to plan, but that'll be a more definitive date, and we'll have a better idea where we are with staffing.
John, and maybe you address this later on, but Boulevard Mall, what's happening with that? Is that gonna affect next year since there's still people in that mall paying taxes, whatever?
They're still on the tax rolls as far as their there's been some tax certiorari claims against it that the town has settled. So they're still on the rolls. As far as the long range, I don't know.
How much do we have as far as arguments with people, the tax certiorari's? What's that coming? I know we always have a handful.
So generally, Marianne, it doesn't have a significant impact on the district in terms of a financial cost. We work with Gross Schumann and John Roteris is our tax attorney, and he represents us on all of these cases. Generally, it's just an overall reduction in assessment as opposed to a refund. Very rarely do we do refunds, but it is an overall reduction on assessment. Any questions on the revenue side? Okay, Mike, if you would hit the next. So on the opposite side of the ledger, expenses. So we do have some known budgetary impacts, right? The most upfront are the collective bargaining agreements. Our service employees will enter next year into year 3 of a 4-year contract, if I remember correctly. They do have a 6% annual increase. Remember, we worked very hard to bring them to a more competitive rate to help them not only want to work at Sweet Home, but to stay at Sweet Home. Our administrators and supervisors have a 4% annual increase. And then our teachers for next year, the 24-25 school year, see a 3% increase. Now, you'll see, I just want to make a note of it, in the budget that you have on your table there, on the expense side, I have added, as I mentioned earlier, I've added about 8 to 10 teachers in terms of a retirement incentive. I have not taken any retirements in the budget, none. So this is just a basic rollover budget. And what I did is any teacher salary line, I gave it a 4% increase. Okay. So again, we've not taken any sort of retirements from that standpoint. So there is a delta to us on those retirements. Generally speaking, from a retired teacher to a newbie teacher, it's probably about $70,000. Okay, so if you're looking at 9 teachers already, you're looking at $630,000. Okay, That delta, it was our intent to use that delta to fund the retirement incentive. That retirement incentive is already in the budget that's before you now. So we would look at, again, about $70,000 per teacher. And then, as we mentioned earlier, probably in May, we'll come to you with some staffing recommendations regarding those retirements and how they would impact the budget. I don't want to speak for Dr. Wilson or Dr. Genestri, but there's opportunities to kind of right size in terms of staffing. So we might not go 1 for 1, right? You know, as retirements come in, we might not go 1 for 1. So just be wary of that from where that stand is. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
Just that some of it, we may not go 1 to 1, but there might be some shuffling in program need areas like special programming, ENL, from just traditional grade level. So there may be some shifting going on. It's just hard to tell right now based on, you know, who's coming in and who's retiring. So we're getting requests from building administrators. And most of it is around special areas, right?
Yeah, special programming and not necessarily classroom teachers, but support staff.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for, like, this is a great opportunity to look at human resourcing and you know, kind of organizational structure. So I'm glad to hear that there's conversation around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be just a unique opportunity for sure.
It's exciting actually, because as in line with the strategic plan and looking at data to make those recommendations to the board is important, that we're not, you know, we're very cognizant that we've got to be careful with staffing, that we do not want to overstaff, but at the same time, meet the needs of our students based on what the regulations are and what those needs are as well. So it's and then, you know, recruiting as well. We've already had, since the start of this year, had conversations about how we want to recruit here at Sweet Home and some changes to that process. So there's a lot of going on in human resources right now, with the opportunity, always keeping our mission in mind, but in line with the strategic plan too. So it's good. It's a good time.
Say, I agree with Josh on that. And it's when I go back to the early days of COVID, when we ramped up staffing to be able to keep the school open, which I thought was a great idea.
Yep.
But the other half of that plan at that time was to ramp back down when we got retirements
Correct.
rolling out, which we expected.
Correct.
Yep.
Obviously, with the,
Yep.
you know, the increased special ed population, the increase with the asylum seekers and just general kids in
Yes.
the class, you know, that puts a little change into that.
Yeah.
I don't know how much, and that's.
So, and as we look at enrollments continue to rise, you know, we're at K-12, 3517 was the latest number. That does not include UPK, which is another 170 there. We've added, I think we're around 65 asylum seekers just this year alone.
Yep.
And so, you know, we're going to talk about the capital project next, but increases at all of our elementary schools continue to happen, and we project those to continue to happen. So the enrollment's just not the same as it was before COVID, and and it's mainly in special areas, special programs that we're seeing those increases. So all things that need to be considered when we're doing staffing. So.
And Don, you said 4% you're assuming for salary increase for teachers, right?
Well, that's how I did it, Josh. I did it
Yeah.
for the just sake of conversation. Yeah, 4%.
Okay.
And again, you know, that's without taking any retirement. So,
And that piece, so when we come to you after February 28th, that side of the budget is going to be, there's going to be a lot of adjustment there.
going to be drastically different.
Yeah.
The staffing piece of it will be, yeah, it's just, we talked a lot about this and how to prepare this for this meeting. And we just felt as though it would just give you the 35,000 foot view of the budget as to where we are now. Because it was just too difficult in too quick of a turnaround to kind of figure out how, who's going where, and whether or not a position needed to be either, you know, gone through attrition, or if we're going to bring in a new staffing person. So this is just, again, very 35,000 feet.
Yeah, I think we decided early on to show you a rollover budget from where we are now to where we, you know, we'll just roll it over to next year, knowing that we'll probably pull back on expenses, which is better than pushing up on expenses later down the road. So, so we expect good news financially ahead.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree.
Do
So-
you see, I just
Go ahead,
wanna ask
Marion, I'm
about the
sorry.
UPK. I only see that going up.
That number?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
We're projecting-
we're at 172, I think, this
Yeah, we're
year.
projecting one more section.
Yes.
Okay, so that would be an add-on.
That would be an add-on, or it could be a consolidation. I think that's what we were talking about
Yeah.
this year. The other piece with staffing that I know I didn't mention before is UPK. We've got 9 sections, I believe, now in the district.
Yep.
And we really, I think we added 2 or 3 teachers to those sections because of consolidations.
Yes.
So we have, that was not here prior to COVID. I want to just emphasize that point. So grade levels may not have a drastic decrease because we did add the 9 sections there.
Does every school have a UPK in it right now?
Yes, the additional one that we're projecting would go to Willow Ridge. They have 2 sections right now. They go up to 3.
So they have 2. Who has 1? Doesn't one?
Nobody has.
Nobody has one.
So
We increased
all-
that last year. It was Willow Ridge last year and they
Okay,
increased
so
last
we
year.
added that.
And Maple Mere will continue to stay at St. Leo's until we,
Decide what to do.
yeah.
with the-
yeah, and there's 3 sections there.
Yes.
So
Yep.
3 sections at Heritage, 2 at Willow Ridge, 2 at Glendale, 3
3.
at Glendale,
Yep.
and, Maple Mere.
So just some more look at, kind of a closer look at the budgetary impacts. As I mentioned to you, of the buses, there is a $250,000 increase from the current year to next year. But just be mindful that that number could change if we're lucky enough to receive funding, which would bring those expenses down, but it would also bring down the tax cap. Our debt service has remained relatively stable. It's a slight increase of $82,000. Our safety and security guards, as well as our SRO, we're going to increase that line to $75,000. Mike and Joanne met with the town of Amherst last week, and they did propose an increase to the cost of SROs for us, which is in large part that number.
So they've always said that they would charge us 50% of the cost for an SRO. Their costs have increased to about $200,000 per SRO, which would increase our cost to about $50,000 a year. But the town, in meeting with Chief Chamberlain and Captain Persons, they're proposing that we increase that $25,000 this year, $25,000 next year to lessen the impact. So, it goes without saying the importance of our SRO, and that connection with Amherst Police is vitally important to the district from a security standpoint. And, we understand 50% is still a pretty decent discount for us. So we wanted to move ahead with that.
They talked for a while about funding part of that. Is that?
Well, they do. I mean, we don't pay for.
I think
Oh,
the
we don't pay
state-
for, I'm talking about the state
Yeah.
funding. There was the big security and. no?
Yeah, there is no proposal in the budget for an increase in security costs. And actually, I think you bring up a great point, Marianne. Our security costs for every district across the state is only going to increase over time, especially as we start to add more digital security to the district, which, we're talking about, as like door access controls, more camera monitoring, that sort of thing. So that is just not something that is talked about. Even purchases of like scanning equipment is not funded or aided by the state. And so, we're going to continue to lobby for some money there because those costs are only going to go up.
And I believe Senator Gallivan has a bill in that he's trying to do that, but being in the minority, he doesn't
Not
get
gonna
very
go
far
anywhere.
with it, unfortunately. I think he even has a support out of some of our, even the other side of the aisle in Western New York, but again, he's not getting very far with it.
So also, school tuitions, specifically those related to special education placements. As we've heard, ad infinitum here, our special education, classifications have increased as well as the number of students, and the services that they receive, continue to increase in cost. So, we're adding $200,000 to that budget line. Our legal services line, I know that we're going through the RFP now, but with our CBA cases still in play, as well as other work that the legal teams have been doing for us, we're going to increase that line $40,000. Our utilities across the district, gas, electric, water, an increase of $175,000. And then BOCES, we're getting bits and pieces of information from BOCES as we kind of go through this. And the participation meeting that I mentioned earlier was a big one, but we did receive word that our occupational education participation is increasing $110,000, which is great. It means more students are taking advantage of those programs. But that brings us to about a little over $1.1 million for occupational education programs across the district. And then the other piece, as I made mention to you, we have increased the teacher retirement incentive, which is a budgetary line, contractual retirement line in the teachers' codes, 2110 codes. We've increased that $550,000. Which again, depending upon where things fall and how much sick time conversion there is, that's anywhere from about 8 to 10 retirements. And remember, next year in the 24-25 school year, the teachers for the larger incentive, the only teachers that are eligible are those that are first eligible for retirement. This year, it's anybody that's eligible for retirement. Next year, it's first eligible. And then the other thing that's not on that list, and I meant to add it and I forgot, you're going to see an increase in the budget. We have to put an increase in the budget for the Maplemere temporary classroom lease. That annual lease is about $27,000. So that'll be an increase in the budget that we'll add. But more importantly, there will be I'm struggling for the words, proposition on the budget to allow us to expend $27,000 for the lease of the Maplemere temporary classrooms. We've gotten around that the last several years because we have used federal funding. State ed has now come back to say that if we want to continue our temporary classrooms, that we need to do a referendum or a proposition during the referendum vote to allow us to do that. So coming up, you'll see, obviously we've talked about this as part of the capital improvement project, but coming up, you'll see we're going to work with Hodgson Russ to do some resolutions rather that you'll vote on surrounding the lease, surrounding this proposition, et cetera. But that's a space that's definitely needed. But in addition to the budget, there'll be one proposition on to allow us to spend that money.
Is this a year to year?
It might be a year. Because we're going on year 4 of a temporary classroom. I don't know. It's been a struggle to get each year. It's been a real struggle to kind of work the system to our advantage to allow these so that we didn't have to do this. But we're out now because the federal funding, American Rescue Plan is done. So this is the only way to do this and to continue to do that. Otherwise, it needs to become a permanent structure, which means that we need to put running water and things along those lines. So we have one more year, should this pass, obviously, in the proposition. We would have one more year, but I don't want to hedge a bet as to whether or not we can
So even
extend that.
though we're gonna show them that we're working on a capital project,
That's part of it. Those are the things that we have to do. I'm actually honestly, the way that I read it, there's an opportunity to, there's a clause in the language that they sent me that says multi-year leases. So I'm working to see maybe if we could do this year and next, but I don't know the answer to that question now.
And that's, I'm sorry, that cost is in the, where is it? Did you?
I haven't put it in yet.
Oh, okay.
I haven't put it in yet.
John, that brings me to a different thought. It goes back to our buses. Years and years ago, we always did our buses as a special proposition, and I believe it was under your predecessor came in and we put it into the general budget again, into that normal budget proposition instead, so it wasn't totally separate one. With the zero emission buses, have you guys had any discussion about breaking that back out again? I know some of my colleagues, and I haven't heard it here, but some of my colleagues in other districts are saying they've got a big backlash about the zero emission buses, and they're concerned about them going down in their budgets and then what they would do from there.
We've not had any discussions internally about it.
so you're talking about breaking it up, like have one for just our electric and one for our
Not just,
regular?
no, because our
Buses in
buses are just,
general.
yeah, they're just part of the general bus, yeah, we're.
We've not,
I
Scott,
think we always did them separate.
Right.
we've not, Scott, and honestly, I've been proceeding with the mindset that the electric buses, we're doing 3. I still believe that at the end of the day, with the funding that is available to us, that we will get that electric bus to at or below the cost of a diesel bus. So my mindset has always been, for that reason, we'd keep it in the budget, in the general fund. We've not, or in the general budget, overall budget. We've not really discussed it. It's a great point. I don't know if the board has feelings otherwise. I don't know.
I haven't heard any pushback in this area. I don't know if you have or not. I
No,
hear
I
it from my
haven't.
colleagues,
I
generally
haven't
the ones in the rural school districts are the ones that are saying it more than,
Yeah,
and they've got different set of problems with electric buses than
Yep.
we do too.
they do.
And I think, one of the things that we've thought about from day one is to hop on this because there's no proposal in the budget from the governor right now to pull back on the mandate.
Right.
And so we wanted to hop on it from day one, knowing how the size of our fleet and knowing that we didn't want to get caught 5 years down the road thinking we need to make these purchases. And I think a lot to Don's credit is building those relationships with NYSERDA, state ed, and the utility companies in order to pounce on these grant opportunities that are there for us. There's no pulling back from the grant opportunities that we see as of now. Now it could all change if there's a downturn in the budget, but as long as we keep down this road, that's our goal is really to make the costs at or maybe a little bit above of where they are now. The big question that we still continue is how is the state going to fund transportation aid once the expenses of electric buses start really rolling in? And that's still a question that really hasn't been answered. But until that time, I think we're just going to continue to look for every grant opportunity or every incentive program out there to capitalize on. But Don's at the state, I'm at the state, and I know you are too, Scott, and we're trying to stay have the very latest information as we move forward with this program. So.
We're definitely ahead of the curve on just about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel good about where we are. It's a struggle to try and make all the pieces fit so that we don't miss opportunities, one, and we don't, as I made or mentioned earlier, that we don't have either charging stations sitting in the bus garage with no buses or buses with no charging stations.
Yeah.
So it's trying to kind of to make all that work together. 2027 is coming pretty quickly. And as one business official, it was pretty disappointing not to even hear a word of electric emissions in the budget
Yeah.
at all.
You know, when we met
Zero
with
emissions.
Senator Ryan last month, I think it was, he said he didn't think there'd be much talk about it until next year's budget stuff. That's when people would start
Really.
realizing, because it's like, oh, it's here.
Well, and that's the unfortunate part, right? Like, I mean, you know, it's for a district that, you know, and I'll just use Mike's previous district, like Sherman, that had 9 or 10 buses.
Yep.
That's far different than a district like us that has 68, you know, so it's just, you've got to spread out that cost. And not providing any opportunities for us to do that now is
I think the,
It's negligence, really.
disappointing.
Yeah.
to split it out though, getting back to the original, I mean, my thought is that would, I mean, my impression with the board and with the district is we're moving forward with this
Yeah.
and this isn't going away.
Yes.
So splitting it out almost gives the impression that it's optional.
It's optional.
And
It's
I don't
not.
think
It's not.
that it's kind of here to stay.
Right.
I personally think
I agree.
but the trains left the station. Not, I don't mean necessarily for every district. I mean, this technology and where the world's going. You know, seems-
Correct.
Yeah, we've operated with that mindset, Brian, from, I think, moment one. As soon as the mandate was announced, we wanted to hop on it.
Yeah, and I think honestly, just even kind of the mechanics of pulling the buses out just kind of upsets the year-to-year budget. You know, it was in last year, it's out, then, maybe we put it back in. I just think it doesn't, for your purposes, like you can't kind of watch the growth and trends, so.
And that all
I
makes sense.
advocate for.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, no, I see your point. I
Yeah.
just, yeah,
It's just a
absolutely.
concern that I don't,
Sure.
we've gone since 1977 without losing a budget. That's
I
why
got you.
look at that.
No, I got you. Yeah,
I don't think it'll be a huge deal here. I don't think.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah.
why I
no,
bring it
it's
up.
just
I-
really
it's,
good
it's a
point.
point that's, you know, that we should consider. I don't know if we consider, you know, and again, 68 buses in an 8-year time frame is far ahead of our normal evergreening schedule.
Right.
So, you know, so there might be a time, honestly, Scott, depending upon, like right now, in the third round of the EPA funding, like they tell you, go pie in the sky, right? So we've put in for, in the EPA, the clean school bus funding, you put in 3 buses that you would trade in, or you put in buses that ran, not 3, you put in buses that you trade in to get new electric buses. So we put in 8. I put in 8 buses because those are the buses that that I've put in each one of them, right, at this point in time. So there might be a year where we get funding for 7 or 8 buses. That might be the time to do something like that, as opposed to, you know, again, I think that hopeful that for this budget at some point in time, that we'll get word on funding and it'll bring those buses down to the level of the cost of a diesel bus. So it'll be negligible.
And then
No,
it's on
it's-
us to make sure the community understands.
Right, that's what I'm thinking,
we're-
like, you know, we keep our ears to the ground for that, but even on
Yeah.
budget vote day here, as people come through the line, do they complain
Yeah.
about that, or do they complain about the
Yeah.
usual things that they have
Right.
concerns about? That's,
I don't disagree. I
yeah,
don't
there's a lot of
disagree.
different, and like, and you, like you mentioned Sherman, I mean, you go to districts like that,
Yeah.
and they're also gonna get 95% aid on their buses as
Correct.
opposed to 61,
3,
62 that we're
we're
getting.
about 63%.
63,
Great
okay.
point.
Yeah, so that makes a big point too.
100%.
But their issues are entirely different than ours. We're not gonna have a problem getting a bus through the district. You know,
Correct.
making where, if
Correct.
you're- I don't know how their longest bus run is, but I'm betting it's 100
An hour.
miles.
Yeah, it's an hour.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a big difference too. So, okay, thank you.
No problem. Mike, would you hit the next slide, please? So there are now, that's what we, excuse me, that's what we know. There are some things, obviously, that we don't quite know yet. The collective bargaining agreement with the teachers, the retirement incentive and the impact on staffing, we've talked about that. Again, you know, there is a delta there that will have a significant impact on our budget. It's $70,000 from a retiring teacher to a newbie. So just keep that in mind as we kind of work through that. As you know, the district is part of the New York 44 Health Trust. We have not heard a peep on anything about increases to the rates and premiums that we receive. I was at a meeting yesterday with the leadership from New York 44, and I asked the question, and I was told to be quiet and wait your turn.
All right.
I mean, it was basically, I've known this person for a long time, and he was kidding me. He's like, you ask every year, and every year I tell you March. And I said, okay, so I'm just asking. But anyway, so last year, there was an increase in our health insurance premiums of close to 3%. I'm estimating now a 3% increase in our health insurance premiums for, that should say, sorry, 24, 25, which would translate to about a $416,000 increase. Obviously, if that's higher or lower, it would impact the budget from that standpoint. Our overall BOCES participation, we're still working through some of that stuff with software purchases and things along those lines, and still waiting on some quotes there. But the overall BOCES administrative cost has yet to be released for us to be part of the WINI-RIC. It increased to 13% in 22-23. And we're budgeting for an increase of about 14% this year, which would be an increase of about $51,000. So in the end, you have both the revenue budget and the expense budget in front of you. You'll see there, just in comparison and contrasting from year to year, in 23-24, our budget this current year is $96,886,588. On the revenue side of it, the tax levy makes up a chunk of that, which is $53,321,588. We have a balanced budget this year, you'll see. But from the snapshot as to where we are now, we have estimated revenues of $102,690,000, which again, as I mentioned to you, is an overall increase of about 6% from where we are. The tax levy limit for us in 24-25 is $55,798,623, which is a 4.6% increase. The budgeted expenses, oh, there's another mistake. Boy, Don, you're terrible. The budgeted expenses on the bottom there, on the expense side, we have an estimate of $101,368,888. So as we sit presently, we lost you again, Mike, your connection, Don. The overall surplus is $1.321 million as we sit here today.
Dan, you did say earlier that includes use of surplus, right, of 1.1?
It includes use of revenue, of reserves rather, of $1.1 million, yes. Yes. So we are at a surplus now of $1.321 million. The expense budget increased 4.6% from year to year. Mike, would you just hit the next slide? So I try and give you guys a best estimate as to how this would translate into taxes for our community. Taxes last year, the tax rate was $15.47 for the town of Amherst. This is utilizing the tax levy limit estimate for this year of $55,798,623. We are using obviously the assessed values for this year. So that tax levy limit of $55,798,623 would translate to a tax rate of $16.19, a tax bill of $24 on a home assessed at $150,000 would translate to a tax bill assessed at $2,428, or an increase of $107. On the Tonawanda side, similar home would translate to a tax rate of $41.98 and translate to a tax bill of $2,330 and an estimated increase of $104. So again, This is using this year's assessed values. Presumably the assessments will go up, which means our rates would go down. But this is also going right to the cap as well. So, Mike, would you just hit the next slide? So there's some work that needs to be done here. You know, we need to determine, and I guess we can have a conversation here as we get through this slide and get to questions, but where the board sits in terms of the tax cap and the overall use of reserves. If we get a significant amount, and I'll just go to the next bullet point, if we do get a significant amount of retirements, again, you know, at the bare minimum right now, we are at, you know, probably a delta of about $630,000 to $650,000 if we went 1-for-1 in terms of retirement. So right there, that's going to take that money off of the expense budget. So that surplus would grow, right? Then if there are any additional staffing needs, we would need to get those into the budget. You know, as we made mention earlier today, we're still meeting with, we have to meet with a couple of principals yet, but for the most part, our annual budgetary meetings are done. And then we'll continue to monitor the state aid. Remember, again, state aid, there's that $320,000 matzo ball that's hanging out there in terms of aid that we should have that's not been in the executive bus runs or executive aid runs. We'll work on, you know, solidifying the bus purchasing funding to hopefully maybe bring down the expense budget a little bit more. And then I'll do what I always do. We'll go through the lines, solidify salaries as people kind of move around and move through positions. We'll look at, you know, more closely budget line by line and examine expenses there. And then we'll finalize the BOCES piece of it. We'll look to get hopefully by the March meeting, we'll have the health insurance numbers because that also is a big expense to us and an increase to us that could help us obviously if the increase is minimal. And then we'll report back to the board on March 12th. So at this point in time, I think that's my last slide. At this point in time, I would just say that if you guys have any questions, I'd be interested to hear where we fall in terms of the tax cap, as well as the use of reserves. The use, just, if I could just real quick, Brian, just for the good of the group, in terms of reserve, I should have put it on the slide and I didn't, in terms of reserve balances. So with our reserves, and our two fund balances, unassigned and assigned fund balance, because remember we brought the unassigned fund balance back down to 4%. We've got just north of about $16 million in reserves that we can use. If the budget performs well, again, we'll put money back into reserves as we always do. And it could be a portion of the $1.1 million that we've got set aside for this budget. So that coupled with the retirement piece and the potential increase in state aid, like we can get to a number if we continue to use reserves that we could get to a number, I think that would be close to, but not, maybe not quite to tax neutral. So go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, it's just along the lines of the reserves. And I know last year at the end of the budget, and I feel like as a board, this is something I don't know that how closely we're looking at, but like if you look at the June 30th appropriations report, we were 800,000 in the plus. I mean, in my understanding, and this is what I want to make sure I understand this correctly. And then I looked back at the June 30th of the prior year, and it was like about 2 million. So my understanding to reading that would be that we outperformed what we budgeted. In other words, you know, we the our expenditures were under what we had
Yes.
appropriated. And in those funds, then they go into reserves to some.
Correct.
So last year with a neutral budget, we had 800,000 left over. What I'm wondering is how is this year looking?
So $800,000, you're not wrong, $800,000 general fund, because there's also some federal funds that have helped us as well. So the budget this year, right now, it's performing very well. I can't put a number to it yet because we have to figure out what we're doing and how many folks are retiring, and what those level of retirement incentives are. I can provide to you, the board, I could provide to you kind of a better look at it in March. I just don't want to tell you one way or other and be completely off base based upon where we are with retirement. So that's the big piece that's probably holding up that process. You know, I believe that we would work through a budget that would have a surplus similar to what we had last year.
Because I think it's important, my view is that I understand like it's important and it's beneficial to budget conservatively. In other words, you know, more favorable to have a surplus, you know, but you know, if we're doing that consistently, or what's the idea being, do we apply any of that to the next year saying, hey, we were over, so this year we can take that into consideration. This year being especially challenging, I think, for not because of anything we've done, but you know, the town budget at Amherst is so high that it's not something I would want to do regularly.
So
Isn't that kind of the point of budgeting for use of the reserves, is it gives you, just to your point, you know, and I think you just said it a second ago, if the budget performs well, revenues exceed or expenses underrun, that you kind of you make that negative less negative, right? I mean.
yes. So honestly, you know, what generally from my seat, like if we're about a percentage point off on either side, revenue, you know, if we underestimate our revenues by a percentage point and we overestimate our expenses by a percentage point, you know, there's a surplus of, you know, roughly almost $2 million, and for us, almost $2 million. You know, I think that's pretty good budgeting on behalf of the district. But yeah, if the budget does perform well, that money would then go into reserves. So it just, my gut and where I'm at, you know, you want to be able to build reserves. I don't want to continue to rely on reserves to close budget gaps. I want to continue to try and build reserves to help us, particularly in the capital realm, to be able to do things with capital improvements. I don't want to continue to rely on, and we did a good job early on with my predecessor and then me following to kind of minimize the use of reserves to be able to maintain those. But I'm nervous about going out at that level from a tax level, given what's happened in the town of Amherst.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think the excess should go to reduction on the tax rate. I mean,
Yeah.
you have 1.3, so that's, but each percentage point is about 570, I think, right? 570,000. So we went down to like 2.6 or, you know, and that's $1 million or
So,
1.1.
you know, and again, I mean, if you cut that, you know, you cut that in half, then you're looking at closer to a, you know, a $40 or $50 increase. And with assessments going up, it's likely going to be less than that as well. So I don't know what I don't know how the board feels otherwise.
You know, every year the state, not every year, but they come back and say, you know, you're putting too much in reserves, you got to spend a little bit, but we're doing that, correct?
Yeah, we are. We're spending it.
Okay, and assessments, I'm hearing a little chatter. Is Amherst going to start getting reassessed again?
Their equalization rate's down to 62%.
62%.
I've heard some things, yes.
Okay, so that,
They're gonna
That's last year's rate too.
11% increase in.
Say again?
Assessed
That's
to.
last year's number.
That is last year's rate. They don't release those rates until
like July, August or something.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
And just from a surplus point of view, and Don and I talked about this, I think it's important, as we prepare for our next capital project, that we fund the capital reserve. So that project has limited to no tax impact on our community. So we are planning for that now. So any kind of surplus, we're keeping that in mind, that we can fund that reserve up to $5 million. And we'd like to get close to that number. So when we're ready for our next major project, it's basically has no tax impact on our community.
Right, and that's the whole idea, right, is that as the debt service falls off, couple that with the capital reserve, to Mike's point, you try and get it as close to tax neutral. That's-
You said that has a 5 million limit. It also has an outer date limit on it too.
Yeah, I'd have to look at that. You're not wrong. I'd have to look and see. We've talked about
It's a
it.
10-year, it's a 10-year.
Well, we've talked about it with Maggie at Municipal Solutions, and I just don't have the date top of my
But I mean, it's something, I mean, if,
But we could always vote, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you out. You could always establish a second one, as a board.
that's sort of what I was gonna ask. I was gonna say, can we extend that by a public vote, or do we have
It's a
to?
public.
Yeah, it is a public vote, but I think we've got some time left. I wasn't worried about it in conversation.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's 4 or 5 years, but I really don't
I
know.
think you're right,
remember.
Scott.
I don't, I'd have to look, and I don't want to give you more wrong information.
No, that's fine. Okay. I would definitely like to see us at least try to get under the 2%. I know that's 2% is a fictitious number, but that's the one that people hear in their heads.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Hey.
Sorry. I'm with what I've heard so far. I'm leery of going all the way to the tax cap, especially since in the upcoming years we're gonna have it seems like we're gonna have a lot of public votes. And I think we should be paying really close attention to kind of public sentiment with things like our electric buses, with our plans for capital projects, with the learning cottage that might need a vote. Like there just seems like there's a lot that we're going to be putting to our community to approve, and I want to make sure that they know that we are being as fiscally responsible with their tax money as possible. But I don't have a number. Like, I also feel a little bit worried about going completely tax neutral again, just because I don't know what's coming. I don't have as attuned to the financial mind as you do, Don. But I do think that going all the way to the tax cap doesn't feel like a good idea with kind of public sentiment on the Amherst side right now. And people are directing that animosity in all sorts of directions that it doesn't really need to be directed at, but just making sure that we're being attuned to that sentiment and keeping that relationship with our public as collegial as it's been for the past how many years, Scott?
Since 1977.
How many budgets?
Year I graduated high school.
Kaylee, I think you actually, you bring up a great point too, that we also have to remember that our residents don't vote on the town of Amherst budget, but they vote on our budget. So there's a political side to this that we have to really consider when we put this budget out to our taxpayers.
And as a parent, my incentive, like, I get more bang for my buck having more money go towards the district, let's say, because my kids are direct, there is a direct one-to-one, if there's an additional counselor, if there's an additional facility or something. The flip side is I look at, people in my family that are on fixed budgets, and, it's inflation, prices are going up, and, you hear Fed and the government say, well, inflation's come down. Well, inflation has come down. That's only the rate of change. Doesn't mean prices haven't come down. They're still high from the previous years. Then you have the issues going on with higher taxes than in Amherst, and that's something I just see that there are people struggling. So it's the balancing and being responsible, right? Not developing a precedent where it's like, okay, every year we're going to go right to zero. But I will say, I think there are years where that's more important than others. And so is it 2%? Is it 1%? My thought is we get it as close to neutral as is reasonably responsible for this year, but understanding that, you know, next year could go to all the way back to the cap, depending on the needs. I just think, you know, it's a year by year.
Supposed to be arguing this the other way because I'm one of those fixed income guys.
You know, Brian, I appreciate your point, Mr. Liable, and that, you know, last year, you know, the board the central office as well, again, as I mentioned earlier, based upon, you know, the amount of federal funding and the amount of increase that we got last year, that we felt as though that it was, if there was ever a year to do what we did, last year was it. But again, I appreciate you know, about the responsibility and being fiscally responsible there. Remember, when you don't go to the cap or you don't tax, that's money that you'll never get back. You'll never get back. So I'm hearing from the board, and if anybody else, you know, we want to get, Scott, you said it kind of under that 2%, but perhaps as close as we can to kind of that neutral piece of it, more so than anything else.
Yeah, I think that 11.4 really left a bad taste in people's mouth.
Well, I would agree, and that's why, you know, I'm just going to ask this question. How do you guys feel about $100 million? Does that scare, does that not scare, but how do you, like, it's the first one for us to go. How do we feel about that?
I mean, just because of sticker shock? Or just,
Well, it's a threshold, you know, it's like.
Yeah.
It's
Well, it was
it's a
the same a
certain, and
handful of
now
years
we're
ago
over
when
that
teacher
100.
salaries were approaching 100,000 too.
Okay,
You know,
I
it's
just,
something that jumps
it
out.
just,
but
yeah,
It is
it's
what
like-
it is.
it is what it is. I mean.
okay, and that's fine. I got to that point when I was putting it together. At first I went, and then I'm like,
Over
look
that.
I can't help it. This is what it is. You're right. I just want to
We're
make
always
sure.
gonna eventually, I mean.
We're going
we
to
don't
get there
get
eventually.
there.
Yeah.
And I will say a big piece of that is that we're finally getting our full foundation aid.
Correct.
And the revenues really drive that more than the expenses.
100%.
And I think it's important, I think what's more important to note rather than the gross is the percentage increase, right? So we're under the rate of inflation, both on revenue and expenses. And I think that's important to note.
Yeah.
I mean, so we're controlling our expenses better than inflation is, and we're controlling our revenue is still, I guess it's the expenses part I'm really kind of harping on is that.
Yeah,
that our-
agreed.
Our expense increase is under the rate of inflation. I think
Okay.
that's important.
All right.
And if
Oh,
I could
what?
also, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm scaring you guys every time I jump in.
The voice from the.
I'm right under this.
If I could also just say, if I recall correctly, last year before we decided to go, if we had gone all the way to the tax cap, I feel like our budgeted number would have been 98, or
Kaylee,
whatever
that's
it is,
probably,
just on.
that's probably right. We had last year, our cap number was high, part because it was over 7%. We had a significant increase because this project started to hit in terms of the debt service. So we had a huge bump in debt service overall. So we could have gone up about, it was almost like 7.8% if I remember correctly.
7.6.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. So yeah, no, I mean, we could have absolutely gotten to that point. I just, you know, again, sitting there and when we hit that $100 million, I went, oh, okay. But, you know, the expense,
to Josh's point, the expenses are what the expenses are. We're not making this stuff up, so.
And I
Okay.
fully expected to hit the 100 mark this year after we got close. We could have gotten very, very close last year and we chose not to. So we actually kind of put it off another year. And I do think that is to your credit.
Okay. Any other questions, observations?
Mostly it's where a lot of the stuff lands that we have no control over yet. It's-
I would agree with that. Yes, yes.
But
That's why I don't really buy into, I understand the concept of, that if we don't increase, or if we don't go to cap, that's money we lose in perpetuity. But all we're doing is matching revenue to expenses. You know what I mean? So that doesn't bother me.
You are, I mean, there's an opportunity there, again, just if from the cap purposes, if you went out tax neutral and you didn't, take advantage of the cap or utilize the cap, that's revenue that you won't see. So in the event of a situation where 4 years down the road, we get cut in state aid or
Yeah,
something.
I get it.
That's money that you can't utilize to help you kind of close those gaps.
No, I understand.
Well, I think last year, I just did a quick calculation. I think if we went, let's say we put out 3 or 3.5% or, because the increases, I know there's other pieces, the cap. I'm saying if we had gone up, it would be like 1.8 million. Well, that's not only 1.8 million last year. That's 1.8 million this year now.
Yeah,
And
and
every-
that's
so
kind of
it's-
my point is we don't need it.
Right. So I think it's,
Yeah.
it's every year, when there's opportunities, to maybe, based on the public, and because, as a representative of the public, we can say, well, it's nice to build reserves here in the district. Well, it's nice for, the public to build a reserve in their pocket. So again, it's that balance of, where do your incentives lie? And so it's, I think, my thought is, again, trying to strike the right balance of being responsible for the district, but thoughtful when we're.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right, what we'll do then is we'll come back and work. I think next time we'd likely have kind of a more definitive staffing update and or staffing recommendations. And then we can kind of tweak the budget from there. But it seems as though that we want to kind of use any surplus that we have to take it away from the tax levy. So anything else?
I did a quick think of one. I didn't
Yeah.
go through all this obviously, but we've always done the 2.42 from the million from the allocated fund balance. Is that where that comes from?
Correct, the assigned fund balance, yeah.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah,
Is that still in there? I
it
did.
is.
Okay, because I know the
is.
controller winded to.
It is, it's funny that you say that, Scott, because if, let's just say we have 25 retirements this year, we would likely draw from that assigned fund balance to kind of help fund that.
Okay.
So it may be that number goes down a little bit next year.
Okay.
But we'll see. I don't know, because I don't know
Yeah.
I don't know all of the pieces yet, so
Okay, cool. Thank you.
you're welcome.
So there's been a request. Can I have a motion to suspend the rules so we can take audience questions?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I thought there was a section.
There's not, but go ahead.
Let's go back to the tax levy. Roughly.
Correct. No,
No,
no. So
That's the totality.
that's total. That's 4.6 is 2.4.
So the tax cap, well, the tax, so the allowable growth factor is 2%, right?
But there are exceptions to the tax cap that allow us to go beyond that 2%.
Each percentage point is roughly $570,000.
That's our limit. That is our tax cap. Well, I mean, it is what it is right now. And you heard from the will of the board that we wanted to bring that down some, but that just, again, presenting the big picture, as it were, right now. But we have some work to do to kind of bring that number down. Correct. Correct, along with the retirements, Mr. Ravenel, yes. Mm-hmm. Well, that would, you hit it right on the head, right? I mean, it would be the retirements. It would be looking at salaries again, based upon where we're at in terms of not only the retirements, but folks coming in, new hires behind them, or through attrition.
And our full funding, if we get our full
And then
funding.
if we get our full funding of foundation aid, that's another one. Correct. Correct. Correct.
Well, I don't know if that's a high number, but that's what our number is. That's what we could go to. That's just the calculation and the formula that you see here. So that's what I wouldn't say it's high or low, it's just allowable.
Understood. But I would also say that you heard from the board that, the will of the board is to bring that number down.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Rabinold. Could you move over to the podium so that the microphone can pick you up?
Like,
That way you don't have to get up here.
Oh, sorry, guys.
Yeah, we got a portable
Sorry.
mic here. Thank you. By the way, your volume is a little loud. That's why we're jumping. By the way, I can't read this even as close as I am. It's a little blurry.
Oh, okay.
We need the audio people to.
All right.
No, I'm teasing. You gave me a mic, that's a problem, right? So what was it? Where was I going? The 8% increase in foundation aid, where many school districts did not get any increase at all, if not decreased. I heard earlier, and this is good news. I don't think it's bad news. So in your words, the asylum seekers that are in our school district was part of that reason for that increase. I just need you to confirm that.
That is a reason why. It ties to enrollment, and then how students are classified in the foundation aid formula. So some students, because of their special needs, have a higher percentage of aid per student than other students.
Waiting in the formula.
Right.
So that's good.
Yes.
In the end, you hear this in the press a lot, that our school districts are burdened with these students in terms of a cost. It's a cost to society, I guess. But in the end, even though we're getting a lot of that funded, not locally, but by the state, it still comes out of somebody's tax dollars. So just an observation. I'm glad that it's being handled properly here in our school district. And, whether you agree with that or not, it's a good thing. So that's all I had.
Thank you.
Right.
Right, are we done with budget conversation? Would we like to take a few minute break?
please.
Sure.
Take 5,
Here says I gotta walk every hour.
10?
10 minutes.
We'll return in 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Thanks, Don. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Mr. Ravenel, always a pleasure.
I wasn't sure where you stood on financial matters.
All of them today.
I saw the buttons.
There's no one grabbed them, so I was like.
Oh, yeah. You grabbed everything inside, then I came out, like, holy cow. I am walking down.
Competition?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have, Karen was out.
The bus is pulling out now.
So we're gonna have.
Where are they today?
Conservatism.
Time does it start?
I think it's
It started at 9, but she performs at 10:55.
appropriation.
Depending on how long it's.
Yeah.
Maybe
That's a good point.
discussed it, like, hey, we're over
But
$1 million left over.
we take 10 minutes, that gives us 35 minutes for the
So
giveaway.
every year fuel check. I understand that there's conservative. Have a little left over, but
Yeah.
that's happening 10 years in a row. Well, that's where.
All right.
That should probably just be a slide here or, well, no, that's too late. Yeah, we should
But at
probably,
least it's something I'm aware of.
it should be incorporated in, I would think it should be incorporated in superintendent's budget. When it's appropriate. When all the costs and revenues are fixed.
How many years?
Last year, the year before,
But you're right, I didn't know. When you said 800,000, that was the first time I heard.
and the year before was 2.
What I knew, because I was like, whoa.
But in the, and I did that. Like when you're the guy doing it, you want to be,
Yeah.
you'd rather have a little left.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
flip side,
You know, how long is it? for?
eventually, we need to account for like foreign.
Well, that's kind of why,
Considering.
that's why I brought up the point. I like the fact that we're taking, where we're showing that we're taking 1.1 out of reserves, because that could be, okay,
We don't have a
I understand we
say.
have no
We don't
reserves.
have a
Then if we do
say.
have it over, then we just
Yeah.
make that negative 1.1, negative 300,000, or something like that.
Politically, it's. Put it on that.
Yeah, after the election. So that's,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's why.
that will be their last election.
Yes, I think.
More participate.
See?
Well, you have our questions. Oh, me? No, I didn't.
No,
have
I'm
questions.
good. I'm
I
good.
just-
I'm just gonna.
Take a cookie if you want. though. We got a lot of-
I'm gonna take one home.
You should.
Heart wise, don't take it. Heart wise, don't take it. Good to
I'm
see you, Dirk.
Good to
Good
see
to
you guys.
see you.
Thanks.
See you later.
Thanks for your.
Oh, sure.
Sweet.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. I was- Oh, I went. Press, you know. Tell you the next. How do we make that happen? So I talked with. No, yeah, no. Yes. Oh, wait, she won't.
Marianne, how many cookies you gonna eat?
Oh,
6?
and leave, yeah, I'm gonna take one home. I'll take one home for Chris.
Yeah, I'm gonna take one home for my kids too, I think.
Brian, thanks for the cookie.
Yeah, thanks for the
Well-
cookies. Valentine's Day coming.
Appreciation on everybody's part.
Good?
exact words. Okay, I think that's great. So we ever. Okay. I almost caught you the other night, but I was tired. I said I have to go. I got it. Okay.
There's a reason I'm asking that.
Oh, yeah. You wanna?
Yeah.
See there.
A little bit.
I'll take.
No.
I would just.
Oh, it's something that I haven't talked to anyone else.
Oh, that cookie was ridiculously good.
What was?
Kaylee, don't worry about it.
Oh, one of the crumble cookies?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're crazy.
it was like a chocolate strawberry cookie.
They're like a donut and a cookie and a cake all in
It was
one.
like a brownie almost.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're muted or not, if Kaylee can hear us, but she put something in the chat if you just want to respond to her and tell her not to worry about it. The rest of us don't mind her volume.
Oh, it's not her volume, it's the volume in the room.
And it's
I
not a problem.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
Sorry,
don't worry.
guys.
No
Don't worry
worries.
about it. It's not your volume.
Also, you
it's the
guys are all
volume.
eating you guys are all eating delicious cookies and I'm having some nice buttered toast.
Sherry
Sorry for you.
made her pumpkin muffins.
Oh, Amy, don't tell me that.
Did you want me to save you one?
Yeah. They'll still be good on Tuesday, right?
I think so.
Even if it's not.
I'll ask her.
Yeah. But they're,
I'm gonna ask. We want to wait.
Oh, yeah.
No, raspberries.
But sorry, I didn't mean to butt.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that, I looked at, is that
My,
Nike or is that what kind
oh
is it?
yeah, it is a Nike. I
Yeah.
didn't even realize.
I like,
Thanks.
did you order that from the store?
I don't even know how I got this.
Online store?
I ordered a bunch from the online store, then I think a couple were
I
gifted.
want that one.
What did that?
Yeah, I went digging through my drawers. I'm like, I need to wear.
Yeah.
Like 25.
It's a good time. When can I wear them?
Yeah, that's what. The docs will bring that.
I'm to order.
It's not as bad. I thought
Great.
$40.
Oh,
25 is not cheap, but I thought.
I was saying.
Gonna stand over them and like.
I know. Hey, Brian, what time do you have to be at the game?
I gave my tickets to my nephew because it's his
Oh.
birthday, so I mean, but the game starts at.
I'm going, but I'm not.
Oh, Josh has to go.
Yeah, I'm not leaving till 12:15.
Okay.
We just.
But,
We'll be out by 10:30, but that's
Oh.
not gonna
and
happen.
she was like.
I was impressed.
Not real.
When was the last
start
time you heard
bringing
him say, good
just-
job on the budget?
I don't think ever.
Maybe last year when it was neutral, but he never said it, but
No.
I'm like,
In the
They
hallway, you
remember
just
you
told
when
us.
they
it was a
were-
surprise.
That's a good idea.
They're in there
That was just a
making
question.
sure.
Baggie,
Oh, you got any pain? You
I
got-
left the baggies.
Ann.
That's part of the job.
Give a goodie bag.
That's a good idea.
I put the rest of the bags in
Oh,
with
he
the
hates
other.
that.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely
that they
hates
can-
it.
you
All right.
can just-
Yeah.
I really didn't know.
I think they must
Take
have
a cookie home for dessert later.
A
Exactly.
little extra attention.
for me well more informed on being on the board.
You're right, it shouldn't be
And
that
you
way.
guys were 10 years ago.
That's the way the world works.
They still are.
So if everybody's ready, I think Don, Toya, and I will probably triple team this one. Because, and I know all of you have seen this, this is not really new information. As we start to progress with a goal of building scope and budget for our next capital project, we just wanted to engage the board today in some discussion about their thoughts and feelings about where we go. I think just to kind of summarize things, the Young and Wright presented us with 3 options. And first, I'll let you know where we are. We have met with Young and Wright. We've met with campus construction. I think all of us kind of separately to talk about what we need as a district. In the preliminary reports from the Thought Exchange and the focus groups, space is obviously our number one thing that keeps coming up from our public at the elementary level. And making sure that we are meeting the needs of all of our students in kind of a 21st century model of learning. So, and as education continues to be more and more specialized and individualized, we want to make sure that our facilities meet the needs of our students. So we obviously know that our enrollment has gone up, will continue to go up. We're projecting it to happen. The asylum program is one area that we're continuing to look at as that issue and that circumstance is not correcting itself with legislation or anything along those lines. And we expect that to continue, which has been warmly received by our faculty, staff, and administration here and the board. And so those considerations, in fact, and then you put together the increase in special programs, as you saw some of those numbers last night. Our needs continue to be specialized and individualized. So the board was presented at Young and Wright with 3 different options. How we reutilize the existing elementary schools, and you have the presentation in front of you. Number 2, the utilization of Dexter Terrace, which we'd like to talk to you more about today. And 3, additions at the elementary school. Option 3, just so you know, so like if we wanted to add on to a place like Maplemere, with Dexter Terrace, that becomes very difficult in terms of state aid, because what the state is going to want to see is, are you maximizing the use of your current facilities? And we know that we rent half of Dexter Terrace out to BOCES, and the other half of Dexter Terrace is used for our READY program. It also houses the Office of Special Programs as well. So so really, as of now, and in consultation with Young and Wright and campus, option 1 and option 2 seem to be the most likely scenarios in moving forward in terms of our impact on state aid and what we can get back from the state, because we do have space available to us.
Basically, you're saying option 1, option 2 is it, because the state's gonna say, what are you doing with your building? You should be
Yes.
utilizing that.
Yes.
Discussion ended, and that took a year to get to because
Yep.
it sits in the state.
It sits there, and we know that additions to the elementary schools also have longer review times and different impacts on state aid. But until we're utilizing every space that we have, there's a strong possibility we wouldn't get all of the aid we need to fund this project. So honestly, there's a lot of pluses and, we're looking for more space. The thing that is gonna kill us is time, like how we look at it from a start of the program to completion of program. Because if we're talking about renovations of our elementary schools, which we believe still needs to happen no matter what, how are we housing students while those renovations go forth? And so if we, for example, and these are examples, if we start to renovate Maplemere, we'll have to figure out a housing plan for Maplemere. Obviously, we have Dexter Terrace available to us, but that's, a year, and then Maplemere would go back. Could we renovate 2 schools at the same time? Then where would we house the second school? I'm not sure Dexter Terrace is big enough to house two elementary buildings. And so there's a lot of consideration with the renovation plan, and our biggest obstacle to that is time, because it would take years and years for us to complete that.
And
So-
do you have the projections? I don't mean to keep. Do you have the projections? Because if we're gonna make it somewhat of a decision, we have to know like what our 4 or 5 years is gonna look like as far as.
So today's discussion, yes, we need to get there, Marianne, but today's discussion is really about just keeping the board informed and then getting your input today on what you think may be viable, because we do have building use committee next week. We do have, and we want to present different options and pricings to you. But if, additions are off the table, I think that would help us. If any kind of eventual use of Dexter Terrace could mean it's either a program-based building to relieve some of the space in there, which is easier because then we wouldn't necessarily have to redistrict. Or does Dexter Terrace become a elementary building where we would have to redistrict? And then we know that the Boulevard Mall project is a issue as well. So we talked about, does Dexter Terrace possibly become a program building until Boulevard Mall is built, and then we could redistrict, which we would be forced to do anyway, and then make Dexter Terrace possibly a K through 5 building or UP K through 5
Didn't
building.
you have numbers of what you reasonably expect the Boulevard Mall project to add in terms of?
1,800 single-family units was the latest projection.
And what does that equate to? What's a projection for students?
I would take it at least maybe a little less than a third of that number.
Say 350.
Yeah, 350 students.
So does
Which,
the number of students make, when you're talking to us, does that not make a difference? Like if you said, in 5 years, we're gonna gain 200 kids.
yeah, we believed that in 5 years, we were gonna gain 200 kids without the Boulevard Mall project.
So,
And that's what we've been doing the
well,
past.
that's what I'm
yeah.
asking. So you think within this time span, we're gonna gain like 500 kids?
There's a
potential
high
there.
potential by the time the Boulevard Mall is built that we are plus 500. Yep. I don't know, Don, if you would agree with that or Toya.
I wouldn't agree with it, yes.
Yep. So, I'd like to say we could make a recommendation. I'd like to say that, we know where we're going with it. I'm very anxious to see the supervisor here next month with the latest projections. Don and I did meet with him probably a month or two ago, and it was 1,800 single-family units at that time. There will be some senior housing, there will be some college housing at the site, but 1,800 was the projection for the district. So without knowing that and where that's going, it's very hard, again, to make a recommendation, but we still have the problem. Maplemere is cut up about as much as we can cut it up at this point, and has the temporary classrooms. Glendale is approaching that number. I believe it's 440 now. When I started, we were 375 there. Yeah, so they're over 400. And Heritage has gained as well as Maplemere. Willow Ridge has seen a slight increase this year. They were down a little bit last year, but they've seen a slight increase this year. So we don't see a scenario that doesn't involve Dexter Terrace in some way, shape, or form. Some of the scenarios that were presented by Young and Wright were based on input from us. So we are looking at this program to build at least four sections of every grade level, K through 5 in every building, 3 pre-K classrooms in every building, 2 special ed classrooms, art and music, speech, English as a second language classrooms, OT, PT, and STEM. And you know our buildings now, basically we've cut them up to accommodate this. But we don't have 4 classrooms in every building, K through 5. We don't have 3 pre-K classrooms in every building. We have an art and music room, speech, OT, PT has been cut up, and I think only one building right now has a STEM room or a STEM area, and that's Heritage Heights.
Glendale.
And Glendale, sorry, from Glendale. So in front of you are the scenarios again. And I know the presentation was back in December, and I know the board has had time to think about some of these things. And I guess it just basically for us comes down to your thoughts on how to best utilize. One of the things that we'd like to explore is possibly conducting a study of our enrollment, study of our district to see how our lines are drawn currently. There are some areas, especially in the north end, that could use cleanup, but we know the lift of redrawing or redistricting and what that means. So we haven't approached that, but with a capital project of this nature, that is something that we may want to explore. A study does not mean that we have to actually redraw the lines, but we certainly would like to learn more about how to properly balance the district in terms of, balancing out the buildings with Dexter Terrace in place. We believe that would provide some relief. At the end of the day, renovations still need to take place, and how we do those in a manner where it's least disruptive is going to be a lift for the district. No question. So what you see in front of you are the 3 different scenarios as proposed by Young and Wright to meet our needs. The first scenarios are reutilizing the existing elementary schools. And there's a lot of issues with that. Number one, the rooms would still be relatively small. They wouldn't meet SED requirements for kindergarten. Music, if you look at the first one, Willow Ridge, not enough space to fit all the programs into classrooms. Music is using the stage as a classroom. Renovations of the locker rooms would be required for extra space as well. And then the kindergarten classrooms would not meet SED specifications.
So why, if we're not meeting state regs for size, why are we?
You can renovate, you just can't build new classrooms to those sizes. So renovation is fine. You can use the existing footprint. You can use the existing space, but if you build new, you have to meet SED requirements.
Could we, I would assume, maybe I'm wrong, but that a combination is also a possibility, meaning, Dexter Terrace, but still
Renovation.
some element, maybe not to the same degree because you'd have more work to be done at Dexter Terrace, but I think it wouldn't surprise me if there's again, a middle ground there of where certain areas of the elementary schools are almost maybe, we're getting a lot of bang for our buck doing these top major things and then as opposed to a full scale, but then, there's enough to make, use Dexter Terrace. I mean, my thought is with the Boulevard Mall too, it just seems like these projects, it could be done in 5 years, it could be 15 years. Administrations could change and then everything's looked at in a different way. And
Yeah.
to the extent we can allow for some flexibility. And then the study you mentioned, I mean, these are big numbers in terms of, the capital projects. So if a study is going to help us make a much better decision on spending 40, 50, 60 million dollars for a study that's maybe, I don't know the cost, but I would imagine, we're looking at a very, very small fraction relative to the expenditure. It's probably worthwhile. That's from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree, Brian. I would say that really studying our enrollment and the projections and where our students are living in the district would help frame our decision-making here for sure. And then how to best utilize Dexter Terrace as a facility in the district. I'm confident that our numbers are going to continue to go up and as far as enrollment goes. It's just how we want to spread the population, I guess, around is going to be key. And then, is Dexter Terrace, are we thinking it's a program? Is a UPKK building? Is it a grade level building to relieve some of the pressures and stresses that are over there? And then, deciding what we want to do with Ready. And there's a possibility of moving district office as well. Those are all decisions that we're wrestling with now.
I'm glad. I mean, just on its face, we're building learning cottages at Maplemere, and I understand there's a reason for that, but the fact that and we have an asset, it's not a mothballed asset. I mean, it's currently utilized, so it's it's not ready to go, but you don't have the kind of the startup costs. We're just lucky. I mean, we have an extra building that's not being used.
Yes.
And I agree with you, and I agree with Brian too, that who knows what happens.
Yes.
Administrations change, just like you said, and ideas change. So I like the idea of the program base because it's not huge financial commitment and it's not pending us into a certain, redistricting scenario.
Yes. At least
I think it's a great idea.
At least not for now. And then if the Boulevard Mall starts to move forward, and I think we talk about it a lot because there is some movement there. We know the town won its eminent domain. We know that there is $30 million in infrastructure money that they are using. There has been some work along Sweet Home Road already to examine the sewer line that when they came to talk to us a few months back. And we expect that work to be done in 2025. So infrastructure improvements are already starting along Maple and Sweet Home Road. So there is a little bit more, there's momentum there, but yes, administrations do change and plans change. And just that might be the best way to be flexible.
And we talk about,
as the last graduating class of Dexter Terrace, I'm just glad coming back.
We forgot about that before we even started talking about
close it down after you.
They did. We can't do that.
That Boulevard Mall is a pretty big unknown. There's a big difference between our enrollment going up by 200 and our enrollment going up by 500.
Correct.
It is, but I would say that that Maplemere, Glendale, those buildings especially have needs that we have to address
To
now.
play devil's advocate, if Boulevard Mall falls on its face, we're still gonna have the flexibility enough to absorb these extra kids, the 200 that your potential.
If Boulevard Mall does not happen and we move, let's say it's UPK and K over to Dexter Terrace as an example, that could be as far as district-wide, that could be 15 to 20 classrooms that are freed up.
Okay, so
You know, we
it
talk
does.
about our kids, right? Future-proofing them. I mean, I think the same concept applies here. Like, to me, it would be important with the architects to say, in this process, can we future-proof to the extent possible Dexter Terrace and in the work that's being done, so that if we need to make a move, maybe the major structures that are in place can accommodate, whether it's programs or another school.
So Brian, just to that point, in any scenario, if we're renovating four elementary buildings, Dexter Terrace is going to have to be a swing school for us.
Yeah.
So regardless, we have to bring that school up to code. So there'll be work need to be done to get that building ready to be able to, when we renovate Glendale, to bring Glendale over potentially, or whoever it might be. So yeah, I mean, I think that's got to happen.
So, and I think that's to us is the obstacle, like, in planning this out, the plan has got to be spot on. Like the logistics of all of this have to be spot on, because there's going to be movement and our community has to really understand what that movement is going to be. We get a little nervous about the timeline then. How far does it push out if Dexter Terrace is used as a swing school? We're renovating 2 or 4 buildings over 5 to 6 year period. This could be really the 10-year plan, honestly.
It could be, and it all depends upon, right? We have in talking with our financial advisor, and Mike's talked about it here a little bit, that we want to continue to fund that a reserve fund to kind of help offset the cost, but to also really help the price tag, because I think that this is going to be a pretty hefty price tag. So based upon the debt service that's falling off versus what we can use in reserve to kind of keep our debt service level going forward and not doing this, we're probably looking at a price tag of anywhere from about 62-ish to maybe $70 million. And I don't know in 5 years if you can get 4 elementary buildings done to the level that we want to be able to get them done. So there might be, to Mike's point, it might be that, we have to be thoughtful about what we can do and what our priorities are. I think we touch all 4 of them. But I think that, if we want to make drastic changes, I don't know if we're going to be able to afford it, honestly.
Yeah.
So it might be over the next 2 capital projects, more so than
I
anything.
forget, are we limited on the duration of capital improvement projects?
You're not necessarily limited. It's just how then it impacts the aid that's coming in. But you only get a certain amount of building aid units per building that'll allow you to do construction work. So, I mean, you can string out your capital project. It's just your aid will be impacted on the way back.
And I think we have to engage in a real discussion with our financial advisor. Do we want to do it in phases?
That's what I was getting at, yeah.
Phases could be a possibility where, phase 1 is 2 to 3 years. Phase 2 is, 4 to 6 years down the road. Might be able to financially plan it in a more effective manner, but costs will obviously, go up too. So you got to balance that.
Yeah.
And I think a great place to start is that enrollment projection. I mean, Scott and I were both involved how many years ago when they did that, and
It's not just the opposite of what's happening.
which is tough. I mean, Don, your formula turned out to be more accurate than what they used. That
Yeah, they were not good.
no.
Yeah.
I think there was a mindset walking in the door, I wish we had known earlier.
My question is though, with some of these plans, aren't we just, like you said, two capital projects, aren't we just kicking the can down the road? If we put in, like, if we put additions on the buildings, we have to fix Dexter so they could come over. And then, well, let's say we put 4 or 5 building rooms on each building, and then we get an influx of 500 kids in 2030 in the middle of this capital project. Aren't we looking at the next capital project in 2020, 2033, 2034, adding more rooms on?
I won't be, I'll be retired.
Well, but it's the district itself. I mean,
Well, that's-
I'm
is
just
that
kidding.
So you're not wrong. That's the
Ability?
game that you play, right? It's
Yeah.
just, it's about how much you're allowed to build and reconstruct and renovate from the state level, and trying to fit all of the work that you want to be done into that puzzle, knowing full well that if you phase the project, your middle school and your high school are 5 years older
Mhm.
and things are going, so.
So that would be my next question. Is the thought that this capital project is the elementary schools?
I think in
I mean,
any
is there
capital.
anything else that could,
Yeah.
because there are, I mean, I personally believe we have other needs as well, especially not on the building side of the middle school and high school, but on the ground side
Yeah.
of the middle school and the high school.
So that is a separate pool or separate line item in any capital project is site work. And there's a formula for how much we can spend on site work. That's not, that would be included in like the $65 million,
Yeah.
but would have to be specifically used for site work. So if we want to do a renovation of a parking lot or the sports facilities or something along those lines, there is money set aside in the scope of the project specifically for site work.
Okay.
Correct, but what I'll also say is that the building condition survey, and I don't know what you're speaking of, specifically, but at the,
I'm speaking of sports facilities.
well, okay, so but at the
Athletic
high
facilities.
school, just in
Yeah.
particular, we know full well that the turf needs to be replaced.
Right.
We know full well that likely the track needs to be redone. And then at the middle school, that track at the middle school was
Josh and I
absolutely.
definitely ran on that same.
Yeah, but was, that track at the middle school was absolutely 100% on the building condition survey as something that needs to be done. So those types of things are in consideration in scope of the project, but to Mike's point, there is the site work piece of it versus the renovation, reconstruction piece.
Like a slightly different way, and I know our small city schools have a limit that's based on, and I don't know exactly what it is, based on their tax base or something like that for what they can do. Do we have that same type of limit as to how much we can actually?
It's
do it?
about how the last time that you did a project, number one. Number two, your overall enrollment. And number three, your Arwada ratio, which is your wealth ratio. So that in combination of those things tells you, like, if you've used a certain amount of aidable units in a project 5 years ago, those might not be available to you to be aided. So they'll be able to provide you that number so that you know how much you have.
More complicated than I thought it was.
Yeah.
It's not, you just, when you think you understand it, you don't.
And answer leads to more questions.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Clarence,
Mike, I'm trying to coordinate the meat delivery tonight for
Okay.
the raffle. So I need to just step out for 2 minutes because I got to give somebody a key. I'll be right back.
Okay. So where were we? I don't know.
Options?
Options. Okay, so I think, in presenting and what I'm hearing, maybe we want to start to think about a study for enrollment, or along those lines of how we best utilize Dexter in the next. We have talked to BOCES about the lease over there. We told them 26, 27 is probably the last year. I just don't see a scenario where Dexter isn't in play at this point. Because we have to provide some relief. And I would like to, my big hangup is, how extensive are the renovations going to be at the elementary buildings? how long that's gonna take, because we need to find relief for Maple Mere, especially in Glendale.
How easy
Pretty
is it
soon.
to bring Ready back?
So I think that's another thing that we need to talk about is that one of the scenarios that we are kind of leaning towards recommending is to bring Ready back here and use district office space as a Ready facility. District office needs attention. Even the brick facade is starting to fall off the outside of the building. I don't know, and this might be a good time to look at that as a program space. And then we discussed moving district office to Dexter Terrace on a wing. The reason why we'd want to move it to a building and not to an educational facility is because the renovations there would be aidable at that point. So if district office was a standalone, or we rented a space that wouldn't be aidable, that way we could get Ready here. They would have their own entryway and exit. It would be in line with strategic plan, and we could really, and they would have all the resources of the high school, which would be great as well. And then we would move district office to a wing at Dexter Terrace, which I believe you saw was one of the scenarios in the proposal.
Could I jump in? I got a question about Ready.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be possible to kind of gauge how Ready feels about some of these like alternative placements or plans? We talked about a couple of them, but I just really feel it's I think I really like the district office migration idea personally. I want to kind of get a sense of how they feel that would fit their needs. I remember when we spoke about potentially moving Ready a couple years ago,
Yep.
maintaining that kind of space between the population of the high school and the population of Ready was really important for the feeling of safety for those students and feeling like they had they could make the most of the opportunity at Ready. And I really do I think it's important to preserve that. So I'd be interested in getting a sense of how the Ready staff and administration feel, and if they have any direction about kind of what those needs are right now, and how we can plan for that as we move forward. And then my second question, I don't know if Don is back yet, but this is probably a Don question.
He's here.
Okay. When we spoke at Young and Wright, one of the stumbling blocks for making Dexter a program building was that it would complicate busing. And I was wondering if that's still kind of in play.
So that's a good question. Given based upon the extension now of the teacher day, with the potential of perhaps kind of piggybacking middle school and high school runs together and combining those together. So going from an elementary run, a middle school run and high school run, 3 total runs down to potentially 2, adding a third run for a programmatic school, as long as that scheduling stays in place, which I think it will. I don't see it presenting as a problem, Kaylee.
And Kaylee, to your point about Ready, I think when we talked about a possible move over there, it was more of a space, integrating it into the current space while at the high school, while leaving district office here. This would be in just an initial talk. There was excitement that if we renovate district office, and you know how the doors are kind of configured here, and made it its own space as Ready, the Ready Academy, with their input on how the space would be renovated here. There was some excitement about that. So that's a discussion that we've just preliminarily had with them. And then being able to use some of the resources here at the high school that they may not necessarily have over at Dexter Terrace was also appealing.
Yeah, it would really allow us to maximize FTEs.
Yep.
So more access to elective courses and so on.
The art studio.
And I like the optics
Digital
of it.
media.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see
No.
it. No,
I was
please.
talking to myself. So I'll try and talk to Dr. Will.
I just like the feel of it, like that
Yes.
they have their own physical space, but they're still on campus. You know, so they're not on an island and not, there's not that separation. I love it. I think it's a great
Well,
idea.
and to that point, I wonder if with the program, I mean, first of all, from a legal or Department of Education perspective, is Ready a program or is it because we call it
extension of the
Ready
high school.
Academy,
Yeah,
but it's really,
it's an extension of the high school.
it's a program within
Yeah.
the high school, right? And so, and I would think that some of those students there, that as we've kind of talked about, I mean, there may be pieces within the high school. I mean, it could even be, doesn't necessarily have to be academics per se, that they would be able to take advantage of. And also, I know we were talking about the budget earlier. I think it may be helpful to understand some of that relative to Ready and but just, could there be any savings because, we have a separate administration and all that. I don't know if any of that could be streamlined or even, improved, but there may be some benefits there, I'm wondering.
I agree. And everything from our SRO really is here to, it would be, they'd have their own building, but it's attached to the high school, which is, from a space point of view, I think to Josh's point, they're a high school program. They could be over here and that's big. And then to have access to more electives, more resources, even down in the technology wing, the two robotics rooms that we have at the high school, that's big for us.
Easier access to athletics, clubs, everything that happens right after school that they would have a hard time getting to because they were in another
So some of the
location.
teachers come from here and go back and forth
Yep.
too. Make
Yes.
their life a lot
Yes,
easier.
that's
That
a
would
great point,
reduce
Scott.
that. Yeah.
Yep, we
I
have,
guess if we're talking like we always do, what's best for kids,
right.
Yeah.
Right,
that's our underlying,
Well,
yes.
sounds like.
The full counseling team is over here. A lot of mental health and psychological supports are here.
Family support.
Family support center is here,
And
which,
they're not so much an island, because over there, I always feel
Yeah.
like
Yep.
they're,
yes. And we've made a lot of strides in 3 years
Absolutely.
with Ready. I mean, Steve Shepherd is doing a phenomenal job. The program has expanded. We are now in a place where students are applying to be at Ready instead of the opposite around, which has been enormously beneficial to the staff over there. They've expanded. They have their largest freshman class ever, which I think is a huge testament to the faculty, staff over there, and Steve and his work. And they're continuing to do professional development, be a big picture program, and the students are benefactors. They had a great success rate and the Regents exams this January, which we were really, really happy to see. So that program has come a long, long way in 3 years, and we're really proud of what they're doing, and we could provide more. And that, that scenario really would be expansion of the program, not a subtraction of the program.
how many kids do we have over there?
We were up above 40
Yeah.
last time
Yeah.
And staff?
Let's see, eight, yeah, 7 or 8.
So high school could accommodate that in that area where there's a separate door.
We could accommodate that over here. I think the plan calls for leaving Virgil's, but mainly our wing, our office area over there, which something's got to happen over there. I mean, even the outlets are 50 years old. Can't see out the windows. So something's got to happen over there, and this would be the time to do it.
How costly is it to bring up to code?
Dexter?
It's at a code right now.
Yeah, it
because there's
is.
And it's
students
used as
there.
a school.
Yeah.
So it is. The only, again, just, there's a couple pieces. On the BOCES side of the building, there are cameras that are not ours. We don't have cameras in the building other than in the one ready wing, so we would need to, if that's the route that we wanted to go down. Same for, air conditioning. The BOCES side is air conditioned. The ready side is not. So that would need to be brought up to code.
Wait, I'm sorry, which side is air conditioned?
BOCES side.
Oh, it is, okay.
BOCES side. And then the building in and of itself, if we put a program in there, it needs to have a beds code. We need to go through that process, to bring it back as a school.
And no matter what, if Ready even stays there, we got to look at putting a secure entrance at the front of the building. It's the only facility in the district that doesn't have one.
You know, another benefit of bringing them over here, and we've kind of spoken, Josh said the optics, but also, you know, it's a sense of belonging. Those, I think there are kids over there that may not feel that they belong or they feel as connected to the high school, even, you know, upon graduation and program. Like, I think it's important for students to have that sense of belonging as part of the larger family, Sweet Home.
Peter, you gotta look on your.
And you know, they have
Kind of
family.
disagree.
Some do.
People are applying to go to that program. They want to be there. I don't think it's the program. I think it's the size and getting into a smaller
Yeah, that's true.
situation. And yeah, they'd be in the building, but they'd still be, like you said, a separate program with a separate entrance, which I think would help those students. Just my personal feeling, I think most of the students there are the anxiety level of being in a 1,300 kid school is the reason that they're applying to go there.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that they would be here, they'd get the art facility, the robotics facility, those extra things. We may have to have some kind of maybe an inclusion into some of those elective classes, but that's what I love more about bringing them here is to give every opportunity that a high school student at Sweet Home has in this building.
Well said.
That's why I want to bring it. As an alternative special ed teacher, I think that those students like the fact that they're in a separate location, smaller 40, 50 student location. I don't think it would matter if it's at Dexter or if it's here, as long as they have that comfort of them being in that smaller setting. I just love the fact of giving them the grand scope of the access to everything that we have at the high school that they don't have. I mean, and the fact that we could I don't want to say renovate that district office to the needs of the Ready Academy. I mean, every year they come in here, they ask us, can we get this? Can we get that?
Right.
And, you know, we have like a kitchen kind of set up in there. We could actually have a kitchen built for them.
Right.
And we could have, I know they do a lot of other, like tech wood shop stuff. They would have access to that, our full capabilities here. I think that's the biggest advantage of moving them here.
And of course, we'd want them involved in the design of what. happens over
And I think we absolutely should, even the students.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's if you were to ask me what to do first, I think that would be the biggest thing.
We'd have to. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead, Kaylee.
I agree with everything that Peter said, and I'd also really encourage board members who haven't been to see Ready in a couple years. I know we had one of our retreats there a long time ago, but I would really encourage board members to go and pop in. It's an absolute delight every time I've been there. It is a joy. The students are wonderful to talk with. I've been with Scott a couple times and have been meaning to get back this year, but I would really encourage board members to go and check it out because it's really hard to wrap your head around just how cool what they're doing over there is. And I really agree with Peter about the opportunity that we have here to build them facilities that can really just only add to the experience because they're already excelling at what they've set out to do. And if we can just give them the opportunity to take that even further, I think, full steam ahead for me.
If you time a visit right, you might get fed too.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that is important feedback for us. I think we'll start exploring the possibility of doing studies around that and seeing who the best firms are out there to do those. So we can really get a comprehensive look at our enrollment, where our students are living in the district, how we could balance it out a little more to create some space, and that sort of thing. And
That
then,
would be another professional services that we could select who we want.
yeah, we could
Rather
select who
than
you
local.
want. We would do an RFP. This is off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
I would assume we do an RFP, and then we do interviews and make sure that, I would also like to see their past work, obviously, and see how, and then talk to colleagues to see who really is the best out there.
The census and study that we recently did in the last 2 or 3 years is not, that data is not, we would need to update that data?
Yeah, and it's not as comprehensive as we'd want, because I think where our students are living wasn't really included. We were looking at enrollment projections mainly, but
Yeah,
we know the North End is an issue, and Dexter was not a piece of that study when we did it, when we looked at it.
Yeah, when you build that route, I mean, I know the enrollment projections, a lot of it they're looking at is the birth rates and the movement rates. but
correct.
That's not enough.
That's,
No, I know, but that's a
Not
big
even
piece,
close.
it's a piece of it
Yeah.
that our own census didn't
Mhm.
take into effect,
no.
into account. And again, I just think that, we've got to pin down the town supervisor to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
at the Boulevard Mall. That's, Brian, you said it best, like, if we go out and we make a full-blown elementary school and the Boulevard Mall doesn't happen, not a good
Yeah,
look.
no.
So,
Making it a program facility, at least thinking about that now, will provide us with flexibility down the road.
100%.
Agreed.
I think my only drawback on a program facility would be if it is a UPK, pre-K, we're putting 4-year-olds on a bus for 30 minutes, maybe.
Yeah.
That's my only concern. I by what we've seen from Young and Wright in here, it most likely it's some kind of a utilization of Dexter, whether it's a program or a separate elementary building. My only drawback on a program is if we do go UPK there, we're putting some 4-year-olds on the bus from Maplemere to, or even over by, our furthest out students at
Yeah.
Millersport and Sheridan to get them to Dexter is a ride for a 4-year-old.
It is.
That's my only concern.
I think one of the benefits of that would be only 4 and 5-year-olds on the bus. But we've seen tremendous growth in our UPK program since we went full day. It's just, I think parents have taken full advantage of it and we're super happy about that because we know the costs of.
Oh, no, I agree with that.
The solution to that is just, like on the airplanes, you need a TV in the back of each seat. Quietest bus.
You're starting to talk like him.
I don't know if batteries could take. I don't think the charge of the bus could take all the screen.
Oh, I'm just gonna say this. I've gone nuts. But Toya and I were at a conference and I was like, why are we buying the most uncomfortable, noisy, smelly rides and expecting our students to behave like angels on those things. I think they should be more limo-like, honestly, than, and they looked at me like I have three heads, but I do. I think they should have Wi-Fi, air conditioning and
They should be tour
comfortability.
buses.
They should be.
Pictures and
tour
everything,
buses.
send
They
them back
should
to
be.
Don.
Yes,
Individual reclining seats. Yeah, I
yes,
agree.
I'm telling you.
I ignored that text.
I'm doing a study on it, Don. I'm telling you, it's my
Put a
next
teacher in the front, you
dissertation.
keep driving around town, not even have a building?
Did we give you what you wanted from
I-
this?
yes,
Or do you need more
absolutely.
feedback?
Nope, I think we are good. I think as long as everybody's been heard and I think we could take that and now we have a little more direction for Tuesday night. I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday.
Tuesday's
Yes.
a board meeting.
Sunny outside and it's a Saturday.
I mean, I'm the last one that wants to prolong this conversation, but I do have a question.
Sure.
Never happens.
Have we considered, instead of being a pre-K program building, maybe a 5-6 building? If the enrollment's going to just continue to grow and our elementaries are busting, that means eventually our middle school is gonna get more students and our high school is gonna have more students. So would it behoove us to think of it as a 5-6 building instead of, you know, if we'd have a 5-6, a 7-8 and a 9-12?
We haven't really gone down too far that road yet. If it was like a intermediary building, since 6 is at the middle school now and they don't have much of the space crunch, that's a possibility. So for 5th, yes, we have talked about it a little bit. We just thought there's no recommendation. I'll say that I think we'd have to explore that and study that to see what would be the best, but
Well, also the.
busing would be a factor and the times would be a factor.
Could be also the room sizes too, because you
Right.
got a different room size regulation for UPK versus a 5-6 building, and that would certainly factor into that decision.
And it puts a transition in a series of years. That's a tough year for transition already. So moving to the middle, that would be 2 transitions before they get to high school.
So, but I would say those are factors, but nothing,
No, yeah.
but it definitely is in our mind.
Alrighty. Anything else?
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hey,
All right.
Bye, Kaylee.
Thanks, Kaylee.
bye, guys.